Hey, somebody just boarded our ship. What's going on, people? I am B. Dobbins, FTW, and it's been a long time since I was as disappointed with a game on release as I am Sea of Thieves. I was pretty hyped for this, I'm not gonna lie. If this was a $20 game billing itself as a closed beta like Fortnite that was gonna continue to evolve over time, I would tell you to go buy it. But at $60, this can only fairly be described as a ripoff, even for people who enjoy it. At first, it was hard for me to understand how something that sounded so cool on paper could turn out to be such a wet fart in action. But after many hours of pointless ship chases, pointless fetch quests, and tedious sailing, it is clear to me that two things went wrong with this title. The first, and most obvious, is a severe lack of content. It's apparent that the developers ran out of money, time, or both during the development cycle. There's no story. There's a sword, a pistol, a shotgun, and a sniper rifle, and that's it. There's only one ship. If you load up solo, you get a smaller version of it. Technically, there are three types of quests. The gold hoarders give you a treasure map to go dig up a chest, the merchants have you go catch an animal, and the soul people have you kill skeletons to bring back a drop. But as far as the actual gameplay goes, every quest is essentially the same experience. You sail to an island, you retrieve an item, sometimes you have to fight skeletons to get it, and then you come back to the quest giver with the item you retrieved. These would be considered the most basic side quests in any other game. Preston in Fallout 4 had more to offer by himself than the entirety of this game's PvE, and he got turned into a fucking meme for how repetitive and mind-numbingly simple his assignments were. There's only really one enemy, skeletons. Sometimes they have higher stats, sometimes they have armor and you can only kill them with guns, sometimes they have guns themselves, but ultimately every encounter with them plays largely the same. I'm not over-exaggerating when I say that these fights have about as much depth as Minecraft PvE. It's essentially the same mechanics, you point and mash the left mouse button repeatedly until the enemy dies. Sometimes you backpedal to avoid their attacks, but Minecraft at least had different tiers of weapon and armor and a wider variety of enemies. There's also a Kraken, which is truly the epitome of this game. It looked really cool during the marketing, but turns out there's nothing there beneath the surface, and the actual battle was anticlimactic and unrewarding. The map consists of a large body of water sprinkled with islands. These islands have no real distinctive features. They all kind of blur together. They are mostly lifeless and dull. You can go looking for chests on them, but you're essentially just exploring, empty areas. It reminds me a lot of harvesting materials back in Destiny 1. Remember that monotonous shit? When you do complete a quest, you get an object that you turn in for gold. And gold is the only reward you get for completing quests. And this is where things get really dumb. There is no real progression system in the game. The only thing that you can spend your gold on is cosmetics. New clothes, pretty sails on your ship, eye patches, that's it. There's no new guns, no new ships, no upgrades of any kind. So no matter how far you progress, nothing really changes in the gameplay. In your first 2 hours, you'll have already seen basically everything this game has to offer in terms of its gameplay. I personally have never really cared that much about cosmetics in games, so it's a drag on the experience for me because I don't really care if my ship gets sunk and I lose my chest. I already like my character's look, and I'm just not that excited about having a cooler coat or a symbol on my eye patch. Plus, I think it's very debatable whether the more expensive items are actually cooler looking. I mean, there are plenty of $1,000 peg legs and hats that I think look cooler than their $10,000 counterparts, but that's just me. But it's, that's the thing about cosmetic, is it's really subjective. Because there's barely any loot in the game, there's rarely any penalty for dying or getting your ship sunk. People regularly sink their own ship just to fast travel to an outpost. Your new ship is always free. If you ever get separated from your ship, this random mermaid will appear out of nowhere to teleport you back. If a skeleton manages to kill you, you'll just respawn on your ship 20 feet away like nothing happened, and you keep hacking away until you grind through to completion. Sometimes I just let myself get killed so I can respawn with full health. I needed to restock on bananas anyways, and the free teleport to my boat is faster than swimming. It just all feels so pointless, you know what I'm saying? My understanding is the devs have realized this too, and shortly after launch they've announced they'll start docking people's gold for PvE deaths. But already this has caused much consternation among the community, demonstrating perhaps what really went wrong with this game. Trying to thread a needle between hardcore and casual that just doesn't exist. Presently, the only time you are genuinely threatened with experiencing loss in this game is when you're attacked by an enemy crew. But only during a very specific window of time, and that is right after you've completed a quest and have the quest objects, but before you've turned them in. If it's not in that narrow 3 to 5 minute window, you're not going to have anything valuable on board. They can't take your gold off your dead body. The only other loot in the game besides the quest objectives are bananas, cannonballs, and wooden planks, which are all pretty easy to acquire, so nobody really cares about them. And there's no penalty for death or having your ship sunk. So who gives a shit if they kill you, right? This is where we run into Sea of Thieves' second and more serious problem. Everyone is already aware of the lack of content, and I hear a lot of people saying, well, we'll get better once they add more to it. People argue it's a great concept, it just needs more stuff to do. And that may be true, but not if it doesn't address the underlying issue here, which is that this game fundamentally doesn't know what it wants to be. As it is, there's essentially no point to having PvP in this game. There's no real incentive or excitement in killing or sinking other people because you don't usually get anything for it. Most of the time what happens is your crew gets drawn into these extended ship battles where your whole crew has to coordinate and work pretty hard to sink an enemy boat. You know, you're boarding up leaks, you're emptying water, manning the sails, dropping the anchor, and then immediately raising it for these sharp handbrake turns. You know, these chases and battles end up lasting like 15 to 20 minutes. You have to work pretty hard. You finally kill them only to find out in the end they didn't even have any loot. And it's really kind of depressing and anticlimactic when you literally have nothing to show for it after all that. No XP gains, no money, no items. And to top it off, the crew you killed will respawn 30 seconds away and just come right back. And that's not an every now and then thing. This is how most of the ship battles play out. Because most people with loot are smart enough to turn it in before they get into PvP combat. If someone does come after you when you have a bunch of loot, it's pretty easy to just keep your distance from them until they get bored of chasing you and go away. There's always an outpost nearby where you can turn in your quests fairly quickly. There's no way to know, which enemies have loot, so you're always just kind of winging it if you go after a ship, hoping they have loot, hoping they just finished a quest, but usually they haven't. Sometimes you can loot like some cannonballs and planks off a ship you sink, but you'll usually have used more of those resources in the fight than you ever get from the kill. If you ever kill someone with something worth looting, it's because they are either stupid or they just don't care anymore. Part of what makes games like DayZ, PUBG, Fortnite, Rust so fun is the fear. The fear of death makes every fight more exciting. The more loot you have, the higher the stakes, the more adrenaline you feel in combat, the more relief when you survive, the more excitement when you defeat someone. This game's PvP just doesn't really have any of that. There's usually no reward for sinking a ship. There's no penalty for having yours sunk. It's exciting for the first few battles, but then it starts to feel like a custom game where nothing matters. This game's PvP should be the most exciting part. As it is, the only thing the PvP adds to the gameplay is every now and then someone gets screwed over just after they've done a quest, but before they've turned it in. That's the sole contribution of the PvP to the gameplay. And for every crew finding a thrill in stealing someone's stuff, there's another crew that's salty that this random PvP interrupted their questing. Outside of that, there's a lot of griefing, hey look, this enemy boat is docked. I'm sure they already turned in their ship, but let's just go sink it for shits and giggles. PvP just does not complement the PvE and vice versa. And what's tragic is, my gut tells me the reason they only have cosmetic upgrades is because they don't want players to get too strong, right? If people could get better ships or guns, they would rule the seas and shit on everyone. So you take out any meaningful level of progression, which keeps the PvP fair, but makes the PvE kind of hollow. But then the PvP ends up being equally pointless because it can't have any real consequences, or it would be too frustrating constantly having your PvE experience screwed over by player killers. They wanted it to be a Destiny type thing for the PvE crowd and a Rust Arc type thing for the PvP crowd. Everything to everyone, but they couldn't decide one way or the other, and ended up being nothing to nobody. It's like that cruel joke about irony where the girlfriend cuts off her hair and sells it to buy her boyfriend a candle to read with, but he sold his book to buy her a hair tie, and now both their gifts are worthless. It's not just that there's no content, it's that the content that is there is hollow and meaningless. It's sad because this game obviously does have a lot of potential. I love the world. It's immersive, it's pleasant, I love the music, I love the sounds. I like hanging out in the crow's nest and just getting high and playing my instrument, bro. The art style might not be for everyone, but I find it easy on the eyes. I do enjoy, drinking grog and hanging out with your buds and getting into these wacky, funny scenarios, but it's hard to want to spend that much time just hanging out in a world where there's not much else to do besides just hanging out. The sailing mechanics are cool, and it's fun and challenging, coordinating with your crew to sail and fight efficiently. It's just that you're very rarely put in a situation where you actually need to sail and fight efficiently. The PvE never threatens your boat, and the PvP is essentially pointless right now. I enjoyed getting thrown in the brig. I loved the human element of it. The sociological experiment threw me in there and they wouldn't let me out. But I had to stay in the match because I wanted to wait till we turned in our loot that I helped get. I like where you can actually get screwed over and be powerless to stop it. As masochistic as it is, this game needs more of that. I like the human element. That's what makes these kinds of open world PvP games cool. That's what made the wilderness cool back in RuneScape. The human element, real betrayal, real cruelty, real human interaction. When this game was first described to me, I imagined like a more casual Rust or Ark survival. You'd sail the seas and upgrade your ship and gather up valuable loot, complete missions and explore islands to get stronger, all the while being threatened by enemy pirates hoping to steal your shit. It's called Sea of Thieves, but nobody ever actually has the opportunity to steal anything. The ship battles would be so brutal if people actually cared, but they don't because they have no reason to. Even if a ship does have a shit ton of loot on it, which it never does, it's just cosmetic crap that so many of us don't even care about. This game can go places in the future, but right now there's no reason anyone should drop $60 on it. I got it free through the Xbox Game Pass, which was really cool. I promise you, in the future, this game will be on sale at enormously discounted prices, and by then they'll have done all these updates and it'll be way cooler. I'm not saying you should give up on it, but don't buy it yet. And so another game release passes, and yet again we find ourselves in a bittersweet moment. Another game that tantalizes us with all that could be possible, but ultimately comes up short. Aye, gaming is a fickle lover, a kiss or faint breeze like the ocean filled with hope, mystery, and adventure, but also sorrow, loss, and reminiscences on what could have been. Worlds where you want to be but have no reason to stay. But still, we explorers venture forth onto new games, knowing they may fail us, but will always be worth the effort. Aye, for like the pirates of old, we are but simple people, hoping to plumb the depths of life for whatever treasure there may be. And though sometimes we may not find exactly what we hoped, we can always cherish our times with friends on the way there.